Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the family dynamics in the film Encanto, out on Disney Plus right now. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? Alright guys, so I actually saw Encanto the weekend it came out in theaters back in November. But I guess after it came out on Disney Plus, now it's just gotten so popular, and I've gotten a couple of comments asking about my thoughts on it. I even had someone comment on one of my model reviews saying who's here after watching Encanto, and I was like, you know what, that's it. I have to make a video about Encanto, and there's a lot to unpack there. I can actually share with you the types of clients that I see and compare it to different characters in the film. We're going to talk about enmeshed family dynamic, and we're also going to talk a little bit about first versus second order change within a family. First, let me say this video will have spoilers, so if you've never seen Encanto and you want to see it and you don't want spoilers, then definitely finish watching the movie and then come back to this video. So I want to start by talking about the different roles that we see depicted in Encanto, roles that you might be able to identify with. So I want you to listen into these roles carefully and see if you either see yourself in them or someone in your own family. So one of the things I've talked about in other videos are things like communication styles. Virginia Satir is a theorist in marriage and family therapy who developed a model called experiential therapy, or the human validation process model. In her model, she talks about different communication styles within the family. These communication styles are evident in the Madrigal family. Some of the ones that are very obvious are like the distractor. Think of them as like the class clown in class. They are the ones who make jokes and break up the tension or conflict within the family. The character that is most often breaking up the tension with the joke is Camilo. He is able to basically shapeshift into anybody, and so sometimes he turns into different characters of the family, and you'll notice that a lot of times if a scene is really tense, for example, when the house starts falling apart, he makes a joke.
I'll be okay. Not if we don't have a house.
Even when Mirabel was trying to find out from Dolores if she knew what was going on with the house falling apart, turns out it was actually Camilo. So he is what I would refer to as the distractor of the family. They have a useful role in keeping family tensions from rising too high, but it can be a lot of pressure. When I have clients who come into the office and their whole life they've been fulfilling this role, one of the main problems they'll encounter in life is, let's say they fast forward and get into their own relationship. You'll have the person who they're dating saying they can't take anything seriously. Every time I complain, they make a joke out of it. And the reason they do that is because they learned that's how you deal with conflict. Your role is to break or diffuse the tension. But within a context where they need to pay attention and focus and be serious, they don't have as much practice in that area. So that is most often when I will see that type of person presenting in therapy. We have the nurturer. This is Julieta in the family. She is the one who cooks and heals. We have this person in most families who is the person who's the caretaker, the person you can depend on when you're sick or need a listening ear. When I have a nurturer, which a lot of people identify as the nurturer in my caseload at least, most of the time they have completely depleted themselves of energy and motivation because they've been giving to everyone else. And so this is where with nurturers, one of the main things we'll work on is building up those self-care tips and prioritizing themselves amongst all the people that they care for. The next role I want to talk about is the strong one. This is the role that is filled by Luisa in the family. In the film, they really emphasize her physical strength. The entire village depends on her and her strength. And what's interesting about it, though, is that as you see over the course of the movie, this physical strength is also leaning into emotional strength as well. Because at the end, there's a beautiful moment between her and her sisters where they say, "You're so strong," and she says, "But I cry sometimes." So if we were only talking about physical strength, that wouldn't even be a necessary comment. But that is where they are showing that this is not meant to be taken literally, right? We're not only talking about physical strength. And the strong one is a role I see within families all the time. These are my clients that struggle the most with vulnerability. They're the client who very rarely shows emotion. They're usually a little bit uncomfortable with emotion. They view, let's say, a family passing as, okay, we've got these checklists. We're going to take care of these things. I'm not going to fall apart. I got to be there for everybody else in their time of need. And I know it's a very westernized idea to really focus on what you can do for yourself instead of focusing on the needs of the family. So I recognize that culturally, sometimes we're talking about a difference in goals. And that's why as a therapist, you have to be super, super careful before you say something is dysfunctional, because if you're not fully taking into consideration the culture of the client that you're working with, then you might be misdiagnosing based on your own biases and experiences. But where I think it's universally dysfunctional is when you have a majority of people or a significant chunk of people within a family who are unhappy and dissatisfied with their lives because of the pressure within the family for them to meet certain objectives for the family's sake. Because we only get one life to live, and if you've spent your entire life making decisions to benefit other people, to me, that's a very sad story to live with. There has to be a balance of making time for yourself as well as making time for your family and those who need you. So the strong one is very interesting because by the time I see them, that's when they're starting to try to acknowledge some of their weaknesses. A lot of times we'll spend months, maybe even years, just working on improving their ability and willingness to be vulnerable with people and share about the weaknesses that they know that they have but would not communicate or let anybody else know about what's going on. The strong one is always trying to be the stability in a moment of crisis and uncertainty. We need those people in our family for sure, but they also need a soft place to land and a place to admit how they're feeling as well. So helping them to develop more intimate, more authentic connections, even though they feel that they are the strong one, is so, so important whenever I'm working with someone who falls into this role within the family. Then we have the emotional one, the basket case of the family. I think this is beautifully illustrated by Peppa. They give us the visual of the weather going along with her moods. She's trying to keep herself calm. She doesn't want to lose herself in a moment. She keeps telling herself everything's fine, everything's fine. This person is almost the opposite of the strong one. They are the person who the family can count on a lot of times to be the reflection of what's happening emotionally for everyone else that they might not actually be expressing. So notice that throughout the entire movie, we really saw like cloud over her head, rain, storm pending. And that's really what was happening in the family. There was a tension and anxiety within the family that was not being expressed by many people. And she was one of the few that, even though she wasn't putting it into words, we could see that everything was not sunny and bright for her. So the basket case is another role that I'll see in the family that could be very limiting. I'll have those clients come to me saying, I just need to get in control of my emotions. I feel like I'm so immature. I'm overwhelmed by how I feel. Everybody tells me I'm dramatic. They'll basically want to fix themselves instead of acknowledging their role in the family, which a lot of times is to express on the behalf of everyone else how everyone's feeling. And people don't often acknowledge that or respect that role within the family, but they definitely serve an important role in the family. A lot of times when I'm seeing an entire family, that's the person that I'll pay the most attention to during certain sessions to get an idea of how everyone might be feeling. I'll say, okay, so you've become really emotional and you're crying. What's making you sad? And they'll share what's making them sad. And I'll go through each person and say, what do you think about that making them feel that way? Can you understand why they would feel that way? Have you ever felt that way? And usually through enough probing, we can see they're usually not the only one, but they might be the only one comfortable enough to express it. We also have the role of the gossip, the person who hears everything. And that's Dolores. You know, as soon as she hears that Mirabel all had this vision from Bruno, right? They already knew right away she's not going to be able to keep this secret. It's so interesting too about the gossip of the family because they are important in that they are the person who keeps the family connected a lot of times. You know, they're the ones who will let the family know somebody's pregnant. So people aren't probably going to be offering that person drinks, or they might be the person that lets people know, hey, this person is actually sick. So maybe somebody that wouldn't typically let everybody know that they're sick, now this person has communicated to the family and people are showing up for that person, right? They take a lot of flack a lot of times for spreading people's business, but sometimes it's necessary when the information needs to be spread, but people's pride keeps them from sharing it with the people that can support them. A lot of times the main issues with the gossips of the family is that misinformation is inevitable. It's like a game of telephone, right? So you spread it to this person, spreads it to this person, spreads it to this person, and the information is probably wrong by the time it gets to the person that it would actually matter to. And so you have to be really careful with the gossips of the family. I often don't see clients who acknowledge that they're the gossips of the family if they are. Either that's something that's embarrassing for them, or that the gossips of the family don't often find enough fault within themselves to work on the issue of gossiping, because their focus, right, is pinpointing the flaws in everybody else in the family and sharing that information across the family network. So that's a role within the family we all are familiar with, but I'll be honest that I don't often see people who identify as the gossip in my sessions. Of course, we have the matriarch or patriarch of the family. That's the role that abuela fills within the family, of course. The most important thing here is when you lose that person in a family. This is when I see the family most often. They have this person that held the family together, that established the family rules, right? And once that person is gone, or, you know, maybe ill in the way that they are incapacitated, the family completely loses its structure. Each person loses their purpose. Maybe grandma did Sunday dinners, or she made it so everyone went to church. And when she's not there and not the person that's being approving or disapproving of family choices, it can be so hard to reestablish that family structure. And this is where I see families really take a long time to resettle themselves. And you see a lot of bickering, you see a lot of finger pointing, you'll see a lot of angst and anxiety within a family that wasn't really as on display prior to the death. And so those matriarch roles are very fundamental to the health of the family. So you want to make sure that you are taking those opportunities to learn from that matriarch and patriarch what all they do for the family. A lot of times they can be very possessive of their responsibilities within the family because it gives them a certain sense of importance and power. You don't want to take that away, but you do want to be learning, paying attention, because when they're gone, you know, that's the cycle of life. I see families fall apart unnecessarily when they could have kind of had a contingency plan in place. Another role that I see in the family often, the person that shunned the most often is the person that left. Bowen, who is another very well regarded and respected family therapist, coined the term differentiation. And one of the family dynamics or roles that he specifically outlines is the person who is so lowly differentiated, and I'll talk about differentiation a little bit later in the video, that they cut the family off completely. They leave the family, or, you know, like that might be a physical, geographical absence, or they just become completely uninvolved with family life. So this is the person who lives maybe down the street but never shows up to any family reunions or birthday parties. You know, they're the person that you probably are only going to see at like funerals or big things, right? And so the person that ends up being in that role a lot of times is the person who sees the world so differently from the rest of the family that people start pinpointing them as the issue. And this takes us into the next role, which is the identified patient. This is the most important role for a therapist to pay attention to. I see this most often when people bring kids to me. They say this kid is completely out of control, they're wild, they're getting in trouble in school, they are rude to their siblings, we can't get them to listen at home, fix them. And what's not said is so that our family can be perfect, right? I actually had a supervisor who said he doesn't see kids because children don't have problems, parents do. And this is one of those things where it's a hard pill to swallow, but most of the time we see these children with drastic behavior difficulties because something within that family culture or system is actually perpetuating that behavior. Let's say, this is the example I always go to because really it's the most common example. You have that child that's super mischievous, that's always getting in trouble, but you also have parents that are always arguing or never on the same page, maybe never spend any time together. The only time you see them come together is when they are having to discipline this child. So the kid might see that both parents comes to their school, or that, their siblings and parents all unite complaining about them. And on a subconscious level, they are seeing that this behavior actually brings their family together. If their biggest fears are the parents breaking up or their siblings, staying away, whatever the case may be, they are learning that there are positive benefits to this behavior. Maybe, they get this individualized attention from their parents that they typically wouldn't get if they weren't misbehaving. There can be so many small rewards that help perpetuate that behavior. So the identified patient is the person that the family blames most of their problems on, but they're actually usually just fitting into the family how they're supposed to fit in for them to keep the status quo, or homeostasis, if you remember that from like 7th grade middle school. This is how you keep the family in balance, is through those behaviors. And the most important thing to think about there is that when we see a new client, they might say, okay, we need you to work and fix this person. That person might completely change. They go from a straight D student to a straight A student. They might stop becoming argumentative. They learn how to communicate their feelings. They have new coping mechanisms. Usually that doesn't solve the problem. Because the problem is not that kid or that individual. For example, within the Madrigal family, Bruno, we don't talk about Bruno, was the identified patient. He's the person that is ruined Peppa's wedding. He's the person who's killed somebody's goldfish. He made somebody have a gut. And people are looking at him. He is the problem. This is the person that we both pity and resent. So he leaves. So this is something I see often. That person that is always blamed as the problem, they leave. They cut the family off. They go away. And what's interesting is that were the family's problems completely resolved and fixed after Bruno left? No. We got this big hole of this person we don't talk about, for example. And then now everything's pinpointed at Mirabel, right? So it doesn't change the dynamics of the family where you have this one person that you're blaming all the problems on. All you do is change roles. That is first order change. First order change is when you were working with the family and it seems like everything is smooth sailing because whatever very specific problem we said we were going to work on has been addressed. But what we didn't do is change the rules of the family so that we don't have a need for an identified patient, or we don't have a need for misbehavior. Because what we'll see is one kid starts behaving right and the next kid starts acting up, right? Or now parents are arguing all the time. You have to go beyond that, go deeper. So sometimes it's tempting for my families to say, oh, everything's fixed, we don't need therapy anymore, when in actuality, we're just getting started and we need to start restructuring those family rules in a way where we won't see that behavior again. And the last role I want to talk about is the successful one, or the perfect one, as Mirabel says about Isabella. And this is interesting because I see this role two ways in my office. One way is you've got that person that my client is always comparing themselves to. They'll say, oh, I didn't get married like such and such, or I didn't become a lawyer like such and such, or I'm not as beautiful as this person. Their self-worth is completely tied to this person that they feel is essentially living out the life that they were either expected to live or the life that they want to live. And instead of using it as inspiration or motivation, or just saying, hey, kudos to you for doing that thing and I'm doing my thing over here, they spend all of their time almost seething and being resentful of that person. That jealousy is actually very unproductive in a way because it keeps them from making moves to make their life as close to that as possible or do their own thing completely separate, right? The second way that I see the perfect one or the successful one is that person being my client And they're talking about the pressure of being perfect, being overwhelmed by never being able to make mistakes or admit mistakes. These are the people who very often have never had a chance to really explore. Their parents wanted them to become a doctor and they became a doctor, and they hate their job, but they're doing everything by the book. I see this most often with like the oldest child. I'll see a lot of times the oldest children feel all this pressure to be an example for their younger siblings, and they'll deny themselves a lot of their desires, wants, the opportunity to make mistakes and fail because they just don't want to let the family down. They might be the first to go to college and different things like this. But inside, this person they're self-loathing, because they have had this expectation of being perfect. They are hyper-focused on their imperfections and hyper-focused on hiding those from the people around them. So I see these people struggle most often with being able to explore and try new things. The idea of failure to them is enough to keep them from trying at all. And some people might say, oh, that's the case for everyone, but that's not true, right? The only way we've had inventions and people who have been innovative is through certain people being willing to take a risk while other people are not willing to take those same risks. So if you are the person who's viewed as the perfect one or the successful one, allow yourself some grace to not be perfect, to mess up, to fail. And you might be pleasantly surprised that failure doesn't crush you or change your identity in a way that you can't deal with. And the last thing I want to talk about is this family dynamic as a whole. This family is what I would define as an enmeshed family. I go into a lot more detail about an enmeshed family in some other videos, especially in my video where I talk about Murray Bowen, and also my video where I talk about Salvador Minuchin. But essentially, it's when a family doesn't have enough boundaries. It's when individuals in a family are not differentiated. So differentiation, there are two facets to it that Bowen talks about. First is intrapersonal differentiation, and the second is interpersonal differentiation. Intrapersonal differentiation is the ability to both accept and appreciate your emotions while also accepting and utilizing your rationality. So you don't want to be so headstrong that you only look at situations from a logical standpoint and don't take into consideration your feelings. But you also don't want to be like Peppa, for example, who's completely ruled by her emotions, and it's very difficult for her to be rational and make sense of something like Bruno cannot make the weather on your wedding day change, right? That's not his gift. She's not using her rational mind to make sense of what happened on her wedding day. The second part of differentiation is interpersonal differentiation. With interpersonal differentiation, in universal terms, it's about both recognizing your similarities within your family and your differences. This is what it breaks down to when I'm working with my clients who struggle with differentiation. You should be able to see yourself as a part of the family, right? You are a part of the Madrigal family, for example. You have a gift, you have shared memories, you have a shared history, you have shared meals, right? Those things bring you together. They give you purpose within your family, but you should also have your own separate identity outside of the family. Things that you can explore. If you want to change your hair color, you should be able to do that. If you want to marry someone of the same sex or a different race, you should be able to explore and try those things based on your own values and your own wants for your life. So differentiation is extremely important. And what we can see when there's a lack of differentiation, even Bowen talks about it in terms of anxiety. So there's a lot of tension and anxiety happening within the family. And that's what's leading to the family literally cracking and breaking apart. Everyone is so tense, filling their roles and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing within the family that they're completely neglecting themselves and their own needs. And again, I know there's going to be a little bit of debate about own needs versus needs of the group. And I know in westernized culture, we're so individualized and so self-centered, but there is a balance. You can find the balance of figuring out how you can best support your family while also making time for doing things that are purely for yourself. So that is something I see a lot that's displayed within this family, and it leads to that enmeshment where nobody can leave, right? And if you leave, you're shunned. We don't talk about you. We don't talk to you. you have to stay here. And I see this with my clients all the time. I have so many clients who have said they want to move to a different country or a different state, but their parents or their grandparents, they make them feel so guilty and so ashamed for leaving or wanting to leave their family that it stifles them in being able to grow and develop and create the life that they're wanting for themselves. And even though they're being there for their family, there is this internal clock happening in their mind where they feel like all of these years are passing and I'm not making it any closer to the things that I want to do. So that enmeshed family dynamic can be very, very dangerous. So if you are feeling that pressure within your life where you just feel like everything you do is for the people around you and you're making so many sacrifices that you don't even recognize who you are anymore, I'd encourage you to, maybe start out small, 5 minutes for yourself, 10 minutes, whether it's journaling, whether it's doing your art, whether it's practicing your music, whether it's, getting on a dating app, doing different things that maybe your family would disapprove of, but brings you joy. Start working on those things so that you become more familiar with your own identity. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk a lot about the different roles that I saw in Encanto, but also talk with you a little bit about their communication styles, the family dynamics, and then also a little bit about boundaries. I hope that you found this video entertaining and useful. Let me know below if you identify with the characters or just who your favorite character is. For me, my favorite character is Bruno. Let me know that in the comments below. I appreciate all of your suggestions. Those who sent me the comments about Encanto and all the other shows that I need to watch, you guys keep sending them. I do watch them and I have a running list of videos that you've requested. You guys keep this channel running. I appreciate you and I need you. Thank you so, so much for watching all the way until the end. That really helps me with the YouTube algorithm and everything. Like this video, share it with a friend, and come back to watch more of my videos. Thank you, thank you, thank you.